It's a clash of titans as we dive into this blitz battle between the tactical wizard Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and the positional powerhouse Fabiano Caruana. High speed, high stakes. The game opens quietly, with both players fianchettoing their bishops in a symmetrical setup, developing pieces and controlling the center from the wings. A central pawn trade opens the d-file. Knights come out to play, and the position remains perfectly balanced as both sides complete their initial development. MVL starts to probe on the queen side, pushing his a-pawn forward. Caruana responds in kind, challenging with his b-pawn, and the pawns are exchanged. Now, a complex dance begins. Both players maneuver their pieces, improving their positions and preparing for the coming middle game battle. The tension is slowly building. White plays the quiet but useful pawn to b3, shoring up his queenside structure. And here's the first small slip from black. Queen to c7 is a bit passive, handing the initiative to white. Pushing the b-pawn forward immediately was stronger. White immediately punishes that move, developing his bishop to a3 to put pressure on the long diagonal. Caruana defends with rook to d8. But now it's white's turn to miss a golden opportunity. The position is crying out for an aggressive strike, but MVL plays a quiet move. The killer blow was pawn to g4. The knight is forced to h4, then bishop to d6 cracks open the king side. Rook takes the bishop on d6, and knight recaptures on d6, winning material. But in the actual game, MVL played queen to e2, and the chance evaporates. And Caruana doesn't need to be asked twice. He immediately seizes his chance, pushing his pawn to b5 and grabbing the initiative. But look at this response from MVL. Knight to e3, a brilliant, disruptive sacrifice. And here's the idea. If black pushes the pawn to b4, white simply takes on b4. The bishop is forced to a8, and the knight hops into c4, winning a pawn. Caruana takes the bait. Knight takes knight on e3 is an inaccuracy. He should have ignored the knight and pushed his own b-pawn to b4, which was the best way to handle the complication. White recaptures with the pawn, and after black's knight retreats to e7, MVL develops his bishop to b4, keeping the pressure on. Here, Caruana makes another slight misstep, choosing to trade pieces when keeping the tension was better. The stronger path was knight to c6. After knight to c5 and bishop back to c8, white's knight takes the pawn on a6, and after bishop recaptures on a6, black is winning material. But instead, he plays bishop takes knight on e4, which gives white the edge again. White's bishop lands on a5, immediately putting the question to the black queen. Wow! Another brilliant find, this time from Caruana. Queen to d7 is a fantastic sacrifice, cleverly untangling his pieces and keeping the game alive. MVL accepts the trade, taking the bishop on e4. A flurry of pawn captures follows, transforming the queenside structure as the c-file is ripped open. Both sides now fight for control of the open b-file. Rooks are activated, leading to a major exchange as white's rook takes the rook on b6. And Caruana finds the only move. Rook takes rook on b6 is a fantastic, crucial recapture. Any other move loses. The point is, if white tries queen to a2, black has bishop to h6. After rook to e1, queen to e6 is a killer blow, winning a full rook. White's pawn push to c5 allows his rook to snap off the pawn on a6. But in return, black's rook becomes a monster, capturing on c5. A tense endgame begins. White's bishop lands on b4, but black's rook invades with a check on c1. The pieces are buzzing with energy as both sides fight for the win. MVL shifts his focus to the king side, advancing his ancient pawn and bringing his queen over to f2 to start building an attack. And another brilliant sacrifice from Caruana. Knight to f5 smashes into the king side. This is a fantastic defensive idea. If white plays bishop to a3, black's rook swings to c3. After bishop takes the knight on f5, the pawn recaptures and black's position is perfectly fine. MVL accepts the sacrifice, bishop takes knight on f5. The pawn recaptures and white repositions his bishop to d2. We are in a razor-sharp, completely unclear endgame. But here, in the heat of battle, a slip from black. Queen to c6 check is inaccurate. The much stronger move was rook to c2, activating his best piece to its full potential, and MVL finds the perfect response. Pawn to e4 is a great move, the only way to punish black's error, and here's how it works. The rook slides to b1, the queen takes the pawn on f5, then queen to b6 attacks the bishop, and queen to f3 simply wins a pawn for white. Under immense pressure, Caruana's position begins to crumble. He plays his rook to d1, but there was one last chance to stay in the game. The saving move was rook to b1. After queen takes the pawn on f5, queen to b6 creates counterplay. After queen to f3, queen to g1 check would have kept the fight going. But in the game, rook to d1 was played, and now white is completely winning. But the pressure is on both players. MVL makes a small inaccuracy here, letting some of his advantage slip away. The most clinical win was queen to f3. The rook moves to b1. Queen grabs the pawn on h5. The pawns are exchanged on e4, and queen to g4 check is crushing. But instead of that, MVL plays queen takes pawn on f5, which allows black some breathing room. And this is the final decisive mistake. In a desperate position, Caruana makes a move that walks right into a forced checkmate. The only move to survive was queen to b6. After queen to f2, black can trade queens with check on f2. The king recaptures and bishop to e7 holds the position together. But he didn't play that. Instead, he played queen to b5, and that is a blunder that allows a beautiful finish. And MVL uncorks it. Bishop to h6 check, a brilliant sacrifice to rip open the king's defenses. Caruana has no choice. The king takes the bishop on h6. Now the queen comes in. Queen takes bishop on f6 with check, continuing the attack. The king is forced to h7, stepping further into the web. The queen is relentless. Queen takes pawn on f7 check, driving the king out. The king is forced onto h6, completely exposed. The queen delivers another check on f6. The king is forced back to h7. And now the final piece joins the party. Rook to a7, check. And at this moment, Fabiano Caruana resigns. A spectacular back-and-forth blitz game ends in a victory for Vachier-Lagrave. Caruana saw that checkmate was unavoidable, and here's the finish. Black's only legal move to block is queen to b7, but the rook simply takes the queen on b7 with check. The king is forced to g8, and queen to g7 is checkmate.